Hello, my name is Justin Bright, and welcome to Kerbal Space Program version 1.8.1 in my next small step RP-1 playthrough. So yeah, we've got a really good set of launchers. Well, we've got a mostly reliable launcher, let's be perfectly honest, and we are in design with some other stuff, and our technology is moving faster, and our build is moving faster, so we are beginning to get into a phase of rapid acceleration that is incredibly exciting to be playing through. So I'm super stoked to share that with you guys. We are just about to fly a couple more of the early satellite contracts, so we're just trying to knock that stuff out, taking care of prerequisites before we get on to the harder stuff with bigger and better rockets. So let's get right to it, shall we? All right, nice sunrise launch for the next attempt at our Navstar D, which I am naming the Navstar D-2. So ascent guidance, let's just make double sure that we have everything correct here. We want to get to a 900 kilometer orbit, please and thank you. 66 degrees with 60 units of Navsat payload, fabulous. All right, engage autopilot, stage the engines, and off we go. Awesome. All right, hopefully I'll see you in orbit. 3 seconds to Miko, and the ghost of launchers past, I think, was following us for a second there. All right, so we are entering our coast phase, and we are in a pretty good suborbital trajectory for now, so I'll see you in a couple minutes. What in the heck are you doing? MacLeod, were you possessed by the ghost? Okay, I think MacLeod was possessed by the ghost. I didn't touch anything, but it just like staged and is now burning straight up, and yeah, I don't know what the heck is happening right now, so I'm just gonna revert this, and we're gonna try again, I suppose. The ghost approaches again. I don't know what visual bug that is. It's probably something to do with engine light or something like that. Alright, MacLeod, don't be weird. Okay, it's doing it again where it's trying to burn straight up for reasons I don't understand. Do you think this is helping, MacLeod? I think I might need to just rebuild this rocket from scratch just to make sure that there's not some weird artifact. Okay, we're just going to turn off autopilot and I will finish this orbit my own darn self. That seems fine. Or even better, I can probably just... yeah, we can just circularize here. I don't see any particular problem with that. Using smartass and the maneuver planner. Yeah, this is not a big deal. So yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty sure that what's happening here is there's some weirdness with the way that I've constructed this rocket. It was working fine in some of my earlier tests, but now that I've kind of operationalized it, there's been some strange bugs with it that I have not been super thrilled about. So yeah, I think what I need to do is just rebuild this whole thing from the ground up. Debating whether or not I want to use the awesome RO tanks instead of these procedurals that I can paint the way that I want. Like, I hate that that's the choice that I have to make. I don't know if there's better procedural textures for the modular fuel tanks. But anyways, let's move on forward to the burn. Alright, so we just asked MacLeod to execute this next node for me, which would be very kind. So yeah, like I was saying, I kind of want to rebuild this whole thing. I've found in my tests and building of new rockets, look at that, it's even olaging, it's so nice, that it the modular fuel tanks from RO tanks are gorgeous. Like, they look awesome, like they actually have textures, and you can do really interesting things. Like, you'll notice that this has a this surface module I'm using has a cylinder down here, and then it slopes up into a basically a connector, but it's one part. And there's also like single part boat tails, all sorts of really interesting things. So I really like using that. So I'd like to use that going forward, but I feel like I have to choose between these nice textures and actually having paint jobs that look like the things that I want them to. I'm not sure if there's a better procedural textures for those for the modular fuel tanks and RO tanks. But yeah, if I could have both of those at the same time, that would be the best of both worlds. Also, thankfully, the AJ1042 did not give me any crap this time. I really quite appreciate that. We've got the ignition failure rate down to 6.15%, which is getting better all the time. I think it's going to take one more engine config upgrade for it to be actually anything that we could call reliable, but I'm getting pretty happy with it so far. Another lovely screenshot for posterity and possibly putting on the thumbnail of the episode. So yeah, not a whole lot more to say. We are just circularizing this orbit, and hopefully this will be what we need. Inclination is correct, and yeah, there we go. So let's just see in 800 meters per second. And the node is finishing up now. And second stage cut off. Fabulous. I think it was going to try to turn me around and and finish that, but I think we are definitely close enough. So we are just now checking for our stable orbit. So let's just use the RCS to. Well, let's not use the regular RCS to do that, or SAS to do that. Just feel the rotation like this, and there we go. So yeah, these early navigation satellites are basically the transit system that was used in the US, which I was surprised to find out was used from around 1967 until 1991. So these satellites were used for a really long time. Kind of funky looking things, so we definitely don't have them looking and acting quite that way. But oh shoot, did I forget to put solar panels on this? Or maybe I didn't need solar panels on this. I guess that's fine. But anyways, these navigation satellites were used in this particular configuration where they had like a long, like you can see on the picture here, this long tether that they use to do gravity gradient stabilization, which is a really cool thing where because of the difference in the way gravity interacts with the top part and the bottom part, like the bottom part is supposed to go faster, and the top part slower, and by sticking it out that way, it actually keeps the satellite stable just by itself with no thrust needed whatsoever. The heavier part will always be closer to Earth, even as it rotates around, which is really neat. All right, so that is the completion of that contract, and yeah, they used a bunch of these to basically take the place, or not take the place of, but to act as a navigation system until the advent of the global positioning system much later on, when this technology was obsoleted. Oh my goodness gracious. Okay, so I'm looking at building stuff from scratch once again so that I can make sure that I've eliminated all the variables for why things are acting so darn weird with MechJeb, because that's usually not a sign that MechJeb is broken. It's usually a sign that there's something wrong with your spacecraft. Like, I had some tests earlier on, like where I spent an hour trying to figure out why MechJeb wouldn't work right and was constantly trying to make my rocket flip out and explode, and it was because the probe core was on upside down. So eliminating problems like that can really help you, and every so often rebuilding stuff is not a bad thing, especially if you can get the tooling set up so that it doesn't cost you any extra. But I was looking at basic avionics, which is very exciting. That is the node that we are at now. The near-Earth version of those are pretty expensive, but the science core is cheap, and that's what we're looking at right now. So we're switching over to basic avionics from early avionics. Not sure how many more synonyms of early avionics we will have. But I was looking at the deep space avionics. The very first level of that is 39,000 funds. Woof. So that is pretty darn expensive, and that is the trade-off for having a core that can do everything that you want it to. Oh my goodness, this new science core is so teeny tiny. It is, the mass of the Avionics is 1.5 kilograms, so tiny. Power is so low that it's rounded down to 0. It's like the tiny solar panels actually look large on it now. Man, that is awesome. I'm really excited about that. Like, it's this little and it's still at 20% avionics utilization, which is bonkers. All right, so that is going to be my new basic satellite hub that I'm going to be using for a lot of these contracts. It's got nothing built into it so far, but plenty of power. And it's just so little. Like, I love that it's 8 kilograms before I start putting in science, and that includes a 500 electric charge battery. So we can go ahead and tool this, I think. Tool the Avionics for 149. That was a lot less than I expected. I guess we already paid for the this part of it, so that's not that big of a deal. So yeah, I do usually end up needing a little like structure underneath it or something, just to make myself feel better, like some kind of little procedural something, if I don't end up having one of those service module tanks underneath, just to give it something to attach to so that the solar panels are not clipping through the payload base, just for my own peace of mind mostly. But yeah, so this is step 1 of rebuilding that rocket from scratch. Alright, so there we go. That's our basic satellite hub with the modular service module underneath. And we'll save that, and that will hopefully not break as much as the previous things have. And we're buying basic avionics for my new Able core, which actually will let us shrink this down. So yeah, there's really no reason not to overhaul this whole thing while I'm at it. Okay, so I got a little carried away rebuilding my Thor Able from scratch, but yeah, I've used a little bit of a combination of procedural tanks with the RO tanks to get like the free, what do you call it, boat tail down here without having to actually put on a bunch of extra parts, and I've moved around the Avionics and retooled that and made everything all shiny and new. So yeah, that's very nice. Took me a little bit longer than I expected. But yeah, this is going to be, this is our main satellite launcher right now, so there's no reason not to have it work exactly the way we want it to. But some of those changes do require some additional tooling. Mostly the procedural avionics are all shiny and new, and I have changed a little bit in a way that I'll show you next time I launch this one. So we are just going to tool this. Costs us a little bit upwards of 7,000 funds. That's totally fine. Save that up, and now we can go ahead and build one of these. And we are going to put this into, I think, actually we'll cancel that. We'll name this one the Nimbus 1. Scrap the previous version of that, just even though it's lost a couple of days, I don't think that's too big of a deal. And what I would like to do actually is make this Thor Able, and we can go into Kerbal Construction Time. This little button here brings up the building plans. And this is a pattern that I think is going to work for a lot of the satellites that we're going to be building. So I am going to just go ahead and add this to the building plans, and then we can click on this button outside of the VAB to just add a Thor Able to the list. And then we can come in and change what the payload is, because this is going to work for a lot of our launches. So yeah, there we go with that. All right, checking in on the X-15. Which is, oh, that's a good place for it. And, I mean, you guys saw that I grabbed this correctly, right? Like, I rolled this back from the runway, basically. I'm not sure I understand why it's down to 46.7%. That's, I don't like that at all. But I'm not sure what there is that we can do about it, so let's just load it back up on all of its different fuel resources, because I don't have a fill tanks button for reasons I don't understand. Fill that up, fill it up. That should do it. Okay, well, if you guys can tell me what the heck I did wrong there, please do let me know. But we can just go ahead and save this, and I guess it's just going to cost me a bunch of money. Yeah, that wound up costing me a little bit over 3,000 funds to fix up, and I'm not sure why. That hardly seems fair. I thought I actually did it right this time, so I don't know. There must be something wrong with KCT. So as I said before, if there's something that I'm missing that's obvious, please let me know. I'm not even sure how to phrase that, because that's just a very strange bug. All right, so just another hour or so until our research and development facility is upgraded. 1 minute left. Just a couple more seconds. All right, and it looks exactly the same, but that's fine. And you can see now that the speed with which we are getting our nodes researched is way faster. So it adds an additional 25% to your speed, just kind of like flat out on top of what you already had. So we are up to 0.122 science per day, which is fabulous. So that gets us our research pretty quickly, and we can start catching up to real life, because we are in now the beginning of 1962. All right, here on the pad, Nimbus 1, an early weather satellite, which, you know, I'm doing so many of these little small sat launches into very reasonable orbits that I think I'm just going to kind of do one, and then I'm going to you know, just leave that to your imagination, I guess. Yeah, so I think that I might do some of these off screen because they're a little bit repetitive, but I also want to make sure I catch, you know, me swearing at the at the ignition failures and stuff. But yeah, we've got a WeatherSat payload with 23 units. Everything else is super duper reasonable and should not be difficult at all. This is the newly reconfigured Atlas Able rocket. 3, 2, 1. Gauge autopilot and fire, and ignition failure on one of the vernier engines, but that doesn't actually bother me much at all. MacJeb is able to handle this very easily. Now, if not easily, then easily enough. It's able to spin it around to the point where it wants it to be. Yeah, so like I said, this is going to be a lot of the same kind of launches. I'm going to talk about this one as it goes up, but I may end up just kind of doing a lot of these launches off camera because I'm not sure that they're actually interesting. Even if there are launch failures, like until there's new stuff, I'm not sure how interesting seeing me launch a Thor Able over and over is going to be. So yeah, that's what I think we're going to do. I'm going to give you kind of highlights reel of some of the next launches, but this one we are just going to wait and see until this gets up to the end of this booster's burn. All right, so this one ends a little bit differently. We have main stage cut off, and now I can just kick off the booster stage. Look at that, we've actually got separation thrusters, which keep it from, you know, drifting lazily through. And we can stage that. All right, and so now we are coasting, and it should, in theory, work just fine in getting up, firing us up for our circularization burn. All right, so we staged the engine and the RCS, and so we are starting to move that around. And you'll see the updates that I've really made to this. Like, the booster is the booster, like it kind of is what it is. But this is where I've made some changes. I have an RO tank instead of a, hey, ignition, hey. I get so excited every time it actually works. Instead of using a procedural tank, I used a modular tank from RO Tanks, and that gives us this lovely, lovely looking booster that does not have the paint job that I want, but it has like the fuel pipes on the side, and also the ability to attach whatever attaching nodes you kind of want to on the bottom. Like, that's how we got the that fun looking bottom attachment part on the X15, and that's how we get this little service module bottom on down here, which I was actually able to attach the RCS thrusters up along that, so that it kind of actually looks like it's supposed to. Like, I don't know. I like the way that looks. I think that's pretty neat. So yeah, those are the majority of the changes there, and just kind of standardizing our launch payloads. So yeah, as we are getting up into what I'm hoping is going to be a good orbit, looks like we are on right on track. The Nimbus, this is called the Nimbus 1 satellite. It's based loosely on what I found that Tyros paved the way for, the Nimbus program, which was kind of a foundational satellite that a lot of further Earth observation satellites were based on. This doesn't actually have any science in it, I think, because this is one of the... I'm not sure. This might be one of the ones where the payload is actually removed, but this is not one that I have an interesting payload on. But the actual Nimbus program had temperature sensors as well as visible imaging that allowed it to take a look at the troposphere of Earth and use that data to improve their weather forecasting. And so there we are in our stable orbit. Fabulous. 3, 2, 1. Wonderful. Okay, orbit confirmed. The contract has been completed successfully and the satellite has been transferred back to the customer, which means I think they're actually going to steal this away from me. Oh, this is weird. Vessel ownership transferred. So yeah, what happens when I click OK? Oh, it's weird. The music stopped. It's so weirdly silent. So anyways, that's a nice cheap satellite victory for us there, so just knocking one more out. But one of the big benefits is that means that both the payload and the upper stage are cleaned up, quote unquote, because they are transferred ownership. So I'm hoping that means that they're deleted and I just don't have to deal with them. All right, here on the pad is Sunshine 1. Engage autopilot 3, 2, 1. And lift off. All right, so this is going to be a, well, let's actually time warp this because we've done this about 18,000 times. But yeah, this is going to be a sun-synchronous satellite, which is a pretty darn interesting orbit that is used for a lot of spy satellites, weather satellites, and visible imaging satellites, which I'll tell you a little bit more about why that's interesting for this one in a moment. But it's interesting because it is slightly retrograde, so we, I think, cancel out all of the benefit we get to launching with the Earth's rotation, because we're launching, you know, in the opposite direction just slightly. But yeah, just fast forwarding through this because we've done it a million times, and this gets us up into orbit just as well. I'm usually a little bit worried about time warping during a launch because, or during a burn at all, really, because I'm worried about losing that precision. But yeah, seems to be working just fine as far as that's concerned. So 3, 2, 1, and Miko. And there goes that stage. Farewell and thank you. Yeah, so real quick, get to orbit on that one. No need to cut the footage or anything, just moving right along. And stage off the fairings, stage the engine and the RCS, and we are off and away. So yeah, this is an interesting orbit for a couple different reasons. This is slightly retrograde, as I mentioned. It needs to be slightly eccentric. I need to be a little bit careful with how I manage getting into this orbit, because I don't want to like have it be too perfectly circular, and I'm not 100% sure how to determine eccentricity ahead of time. I'm sure there's calculators for that, but I may actually just do this burn manually to... yeah, I think I'm going to just do this burn manually now that I think about it. I have no interest in screwing this up to the point where I don't get this orbit. Because we have our inclination just about, so we can just kind of move ourselves prograde. We have an orbit above 300 kilometers, which is good. And yep, so it's really just eccentricity. So I just need to wait until we get our eccentricity below 0.04 and not below 0.02, and then I can cut this burn. Okay, just 10 seconds to this burn, so let's go ahead and start ullaging up. And, oh, all right, wow, that's very handy. It, like, didn't activate the engine until it was ullaged properly. That was very convenient, actually. But yeah, you can see our eccentricity is dropping as we begin to circularize our orbit. So yeah, this is a satellite that I have part of the new redesign. I've shown you a little bit about the cool new undersides and all that. I'm really enjoying this as my new satellite hub. But this particular satellite is packed full of all the science that I haven't been able to get yet. Basically everything that's left in low Earth orbit, this satellite is designed to do, except for things that require like returning samples, like biological science and that sort of thing. So this has a visible imager, so it has a camera hanging off it. It has a magnetometer, which is usually too heavy for my missions, and it has a cosmic ray science. All right, getting pretty close to the end of our burn, so I'm going to just kill rotation and watch very carefully as we go down, and then we want to go back up to 0.02. And there we go. So that puts us into a 393 kilometer by 762 kilometer orbit, which looks like it checks all the boxes. Fantastic. And there we go. True sun-synchronous orbits are not actually possible in KSP due to the equatorial bulge not being present, but this is pretty darn similar. I wonder if that's something that Principia properly emulates. Maybe, but it's also, Principia is kind of a lot, so I'm still not going over to that. Alright, so yeah, that is that. Our maneuver is locked, so we still need to be over a station, would be great. Future Justin here, and while I am getting this satellite into a correct orientation so that it is able to gather up the sun's rays and continue doing science after we stage off the payload, I want to talk a little bit about sun-synchronous orbits because I was so egregiously wrong during my actual recording of this that I needed to step in and correct myself, but you don't get to see the wrong stuff. I'll just tell you the correct thing. And so anyways, the sun-synchronous orbit is, as we're in this pretty polar orbit, the interesting factor is that it will always have the same relationship with the sun and a given point on Earth. By which I mean, boom, staged off. By which I mean, every time that it passes over a given point on Earth, the sun will be in the same position it was in the previous time because it precesses about its orbit in the exact same relationship with the sun. So it precesses through that in 1 year's time. And so that is really good for weather satellites, spy satellites, and other things where the direction and angle of sunlight matters. So yeah, that is that, and we are in a good orbit. All right, let's pick up some additional contracts, shall we? As we are progressing forward and doing these early satellite contracts, I think that we are also ready now, finally, to debut my Atlas analog rocket. And to help pay for that, we are going to pick up Lunar Orbiter. So let's go ahead and grab that because that advance is going to fund our ability to, tool and prepare this this new launch vehicle. And let's also grab another early weather satellite just so that we have a bunch of funds up front and then we have a couple rockets to build right in a row. It's always nice to have, a couple different things to work on sequentially. All right, so we've got to make some purchases before we're able to actually use this rocket. And so what we need are the procedural probe core from the latest node that we got as far as avionics, basic avionics, I think. And I love these. I've heard some different things about whether or not these are totally working yet. They're mostly working, as from what I've heard, with the latest RP-1 master and so forth. But I've been using it in my tests, and they've been working out great. And I really want to use them because they're gorgeous. So instead of just a plain polygon or a cylinder or whatever, you can actually use different models and then scale them up or down. Like there's some from Coatl Aerospace, the Probes Plus mod, just lots of really different cool probe bodies that fill different niches. And then there's some from Blue Dog, which are a little bit more on the realistic side. Love these. I kind of love this thing. Even got like an accurate Sputnik 3, which is a really cool, spooky looking thing. Yeah, so lots of different ones of different types and different shapes and sizes, and they actually look like probe bodies, so they're not all going to look like featureless hexagons like I'd been using before. So yeah, that's step one for our for the upgrades that we're getting. I would also like to, let's just go into our avionics. So we have basic avionics and near-Earth procedurals, and we have the science core, but now we need to get deep space avionics, which is going to cost another 31,000 funds. So we've spent 51,000 so far just tooling, unlocking research and unlocking the deep space avionics node. And as I've mentioned before, deep space avionics is incredibly cool because you can go from controlling, you know, this now can control 300 kilograms, and it uses up 55 watts of power, but you shut down the avionics, and then it uses 3 watts of power, which is fabulous. It makes it basically a toggleable between near space and science core, and deep space avionics does not have any limitations on the range that it is from Earth. So that is going to be something that we are going to get used to having our payloads be kind of from now on. So yeah, that's the other step. All right, so here we have what I'm calling the Tela 1, which is my drop tank configuration Atlas analog. Atlas Able, to be more specific. So players of old Final Fantasy games may recognize the name Tela as a particular wizard who may call you a spoony bard if he is feeling particularly saucy. So yeah, I kind of figured that this is an old and venerable rocket that kind of knows everything and has seen everything, but it's, you know, not particularly modern. So that's kind of where my naming came from on that. So yeah, that's going to be our main launch system. So this configuration I am calling the Tela. We're going to continue calling this the Able upper stage because that's exactly what it is. So let's break this down just a little bit. There shouldn't be too much here that is surprising. We are using LR105 engine here in the center with the LR105 NA-3 configuration, which was an early Atlas engine. So this was not like the production line Atlas. This was still being used on one of the intercontinental ballistic missile variants of the Atlas that did not fly probes or anything like that. I'm pretty sure the first production model was something like the NA-5, which was used for the Atlas D, according to this little tooltip here. This was used for the Atlas A/B, which I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure is one of the test variants of the engine. And the same thing with the, and this is the sustainer here in the center. We have 2 boosters on the side, which are the LR89 NA-3, which is the same age and so forth, used on the early Atlas rockets. Yeah, so the actual Atlas was a 1.5-stage configuration where it had a skirt around the center that you attached these LR89s to, and you could stage that off and drop that halfway up the ascent to reduce the mass, and just use the more efficient LR105 to get you all the way into orbit. I'm not doing anything like that because MacJeb PVG doesn't play well with it, so we're going to use a fully strap-on booster solution for that, which is a little bit more of a Soviet approach, but we know that this works, so that's totally fine. Yeah, so instead of the 1.5 stage configuration, we have a fully strap-on booster configuration, and I can tell you all about all the way that it kind of fits together later on. But yeah, we've migrated the avionics up here. We've got the latest and greatest avionics there. Then we have an interstage that hides the newly configured Able stage, which I showed you before, where it has the RCS kind of tucked away into the skeletal frame, which I really enjoy. Nothing else new about that Able stage. All right, so pulling that off, this is the kind of the crowning glory of this new rocket system. This is an adaptable stage that I'm going to be using for most of my launches going forward. This is particularly configured for lunar orbit insertion, but I believe that I can just kind of stretch and move this tank to work. So let's talk about that for just a second. So this is a deep space probe core, which means it can control 310 kilograms of mass, and then when I flip it off, it goes down to just using 3 watts. It's still pretty heavy and very expensive, especially to tool, but that is functionality that you cannot duplicate elsewhere. There's just nothing else you can do to get that level of performance. And that's pretty much necessary between that and the Communotron antenna that we need to orbit the moon. So we should, in theory, have good control and good data return sending stuff back from the moon, because you see I've tuned this transmit power up to 36 dBm, which uses even more power, but with our ability to save power and point specifically and directly at the sun, so I can actually point these 2 solar panels to optimally collect the sunlight, makes me a little bit less concerned about how this is oriented and configured, and the ability to draw lots of power. So we've got a bunch of experiments stacked up there. We're going to end up, I think, the first time in a high orbit around the moon. So we've got the science that we can do in high orbit. That would be very nice to do. And that is everything about this probe core and the solar panels and this stuff here. So the only thing that's left is this 1.1 kilonewton thruster, which is the thing that is that makes this possible. So these little thrusters act as RCS. So you'll see that they actually use the RCS configuration window instead of the engine selection window. And they're a little bit, I'm not sure how to put it. Like it's not that they're cheaty, but they don't have any kind of failure attached to them. Like they can't fail to ignite. There's no mean time between failures as far as I know. They just work perfectly forever, every time. Until you run out of fuel, which is fantastic. And they run on hydrazine, which is the new fuel that unlocks with that same early flight control node, which has 198 seconds of specific impulse, which makes it really, really good for exactly what we're doing here. So we have a very low thrust to weight ratio thruster on the back here, just enough to get us into orbit and stable for either a high or low orbit around the moon, and then thrusters on the side here, just the tiny quads to adjust orbit more precisely. And yeah, that is my new orbital maneuvering system, and I'm super stoked about it. I'm pretty sure this will get us successfully to the moon, and get us tons of science and really start moving us forward, and also allow us to do that lunar orbit contract. So yeah, skimming down, we need to have a periapsis between 20,000 meters and 5 million meters around the moon. So yeah, we could actually do a low orbit, or an orbit that goes from low to high, because I think the orbit cutoff is like 100 and something thousand meters above the moon surface. So it's actually pretty darn low. So yeah, we could have a probe that dips down into low orbit and then swings back up. So yeah, we'll see how that works. But yeah, so this is my new major launch system. This is going to be the Tela is going to be what I use on the vast majority of my launches of satellites and so forth in low Earth orbit that are heavy, because based on my testing, I can get something like 2.7 tons into a 150 or 160 kilometer orbit, which is fantastic. That of course includes the Able upper stage. So there's also a variant of this that I've adjusted the upper stage on to be longer and stronger and have a double thrusters that is going to be able to, I think, get into a geostationary orbit, which will knock out on yet another contract. But these are big, heavy, expensive rockets. So we've got our Tela 1 here, and with tooling of all that, it's still going to be 6,354, and the tooling is going to cost us 32,000. So let's just do that. There we go. That's still a very expensive rocket, but it only will take us 124 days, and that's before we've added any more of these points to the VAB. Alright, so we'll continue with the Final Fantasy IV theme and call this one the Moonfarer 1, since this is modeled vaguely after the incredibly creatively named Lunar Orbiter. All right, so we've also thrown a Nimbus satellite on the list so that we can get another weather satellite in orbit. Everything's good. We're just getting a lot of money and moving things right along. You'll notice that I've added duplicates to the list for every rocket that I'm launching. That way I can, not have to save quite as much money because I know exactly how much is in the bank, is banked for each one of those. So that should be all settled. So we can then spend a big chunk of the extra funding that we have. We'll save 27,000. That sounds fine because the rollout costs ought to be fairly expensive. But that gives us another 9 points to play with. So let's get science caught up. We are really I've been really wanting to get my science caught up. So let's just go straight up even it out. 54-54. That gets us our entry, descent, and landing nodes in 130 days and really needs to light a fire under me to launch some scientific satellites. As soon as we get entry, descent, and landing, after we finish up primitive solar panels, just to get it off my list, that I think is going to be a big advancement towards doing more scientific payloads, because we're going to be able to do biological sample returns and advanced biological sample returns. So yeah, I'll be able to use my new Tele rocket to launch stuff into fairly high orbits and then hopefully to return them. All right, on the pad with Navstar 3, 3, 2, 1. Ignition and liftoff of the Navstar C, which is heading up to provide navigational guidance and testing of early satellite navigation systems. But yeah, that's all there is for that one. But thought I'd do like a more dramatic liftoff video. But yeah, this is just another one of these Navstar satellites, like many of the ones before it. And we'll see how well this performs. Miko and the booster stage is away. Pop that off and start this up, and we are good to go. The color that, oh, there we go. There was a weird moment where this looked like it was all black, but now it's all the correct color. And we're off, and everything has lit up properly. Yeah, so this is just another in the Navstar constellation, which is, early test navigation satellites using the Doppler effect to determine location. So yeah, we'll get another one of these in orbit that lets us cancel the other one that I had down here. So we'll just scrap that, and that gets us some money back, which is lovely. Love it when things don't fail. Yeah, and so unless this fails out before it gets into orbit, that is where I will leave this one. So yeah, moving right along. All right, so we've finished up that orbit, and I've just realized that I already have a Navstar D in orbit, so we'll name this one Navstar E, and that is it for this one. We will leave that there. All right, Johnny Flores on the pad, waiting for attachment to our air launch vehicle. I should be not fussing around and actually getting getting everything ready. This is the X-Planes High contract that I am attempting now. What the idea behind this is I'd like to, ideally, see how high I can get, because this vehicle is capable of getting pretty far. Is pretty capable on re-entry. So I want to see if it's able to go a little bit further, a little bit faster, because the suborbital contracts, not just the X-plane contracts, ask for you to get to 180 kilometers, and I want to start seeing if I can do that with an X-plane, or if I need to wait on that for my Mercury capsule. So I'm doing everything I can to try to launch this a little more like a rocket. We are pointed above 45 degrees. That is going to make things a little bit dicier on re-entry, but I'm hopeful that that will be okay. But yeah, we are going to see how high we get on this trajectory with this engine. This may also be something that we have to wait until we get the XLR 99. Oh no, we are tipping up, which is not actually what I want to be happening right now. want to tip down. Let's go. Okay, atmospheric autopilot is having some trouble. Oh no, that was worse. Ah, goodness. Okay. Okay, stop. Everything stop. All right, so we have capped out at 157 kilometers, and then I completely lost control because of my panicking at the last minute there. So now we are just going to try to reorient ourselves for the rest of this flight. We have plenty of RCS fuel, and our jets are oriented such that we should be able to pretty easily maneuver around. All right, you hear that music beginning? That means we are now out of the atmosphere. This is the first time that a pilot, and this is Johnny Flores once again, has left the atmosphere of Earth. So sure, he passed the Kármán line before, but over 140 kilometers really does mean something different for us. All right, so now we are gently drifting forward and doing hopefully some science. What kind of science are you doing, sir? Everything you can be. Crew report in space! And Earth photography. Looks like he just is able to lean out the window with a camera, because I definitely did not put a Earth photography experiment on here, as far as I remember. So yeah, that's some really good early science that we're going to be able to get. We should knock out this crew report, most likely, but by the time we come back down. Impact time in 3 minutes? Oh, maybe not. But we'll spend a minute or two in orbit or in the suborbital environment, and then we will dip back down, and hopefully it will not be too terrifying. All right, I am going to adjust our attitude so that we have the belly kind of facing down a little bit. We are definitely going to start tipping down as we hit the atmosphere, because you can see that we are pretty well pointed straight down, and that's not great. So I'm hoping that this belly flop into the atmosphere will help slow us down before we start, you know, launching straight down like a spear. I would just like to say Johnny Flores appears to be having the time of his life. So I feel like I chose pretty correctly as far as who I should have pilot this thing. Ooh, it is pulling me all the way back down as we get into the lower atmosphere. I had no option whatsoever. 45 degrees down is not great, so we are going to be trying to fight that as best we can. Okay, we are getting down into a point where I do not want to touch the controls anymore. Whoa, what is happening? Hold steady. Hold steady. I do not know why you're upside down. Alright, it's... Whoa! Alright, this is not a good regime for us. Dang, okay. I have torn off the wings in my attempt to bring this back down. But, we are sort of okay. Like, we're definitely not gliding or anything. Oh my god, am I going up? What in the actual heck? How in the world did that happen? Alright, so I guess we are coming back down. That was definitely my fault, but I'm not sure what I was supposed to do differently there, other than, you know, not put this in that kind of a orientation to begin with. But yeah, we are kind of flying sort of in a weird way. Like there's enough lift on the underside of this craft that we are getting a little bit of a glide, but we are inexorably falling down. So we are about to pull the parachute, and I'm just very hopeful that Johnny Flores survives, and we will be able, he will live to fight another day. But yeah, this is a loss on this spacecraft. This has taught us quite a bit about not going into a above 45 degree climb and then come back down on a 45-degree dive. That is not great, not dangerous. I did not have enough horizontal velocity to actually make this a safe trajectory. And with the way the weight is, we are now pointing straight down, and I'm very hopeful that the cockpit survives this, because I do not want to lose an astronaut. It feels a little weird to try to talk about the history of the X-15 after that shoddy performance, but one thing I guess I'll just say is that the X-15, before it had the XLR-99s, it actually flew 24 flights with a pair of XLR-11s. So I'm using 3, which gives us a little more thrust, but they actually used 2, which is probably better. Oh man, I really don't like this. All right, go. All right. Whew, okay. Well, it could have been worse. I guess that should be the motto for my my playthrough here. But yeah, so Johnny Flores is going to make it home. We are going to roll this back and see what we can salvage. We've definitely learned a lot from the suborbital hop, and both in terms of actual science and also in terms of design. And if nothing else, we completed the X-Planes High contract and realized we cannot do that suborbital flight just yet. Alright, I really do not understand what KCT is doing here. I replaced the entire set of wings this time. Like everything except for like this back fin here and the cockpit. And this gives me 90% edited. When I was just refueling last time, it gave me 50% edited. So I have no idea what that is or why, but whatever, it's fine. We'll save this one for 32 days and we'll have another X-15. All right, exciting times. We have unlocked entry, descent, and landing, which gives us heat shields that are usable in low Earth orbit, which is just fantastic. I'm willing to bet that you buy one of these and you get all of them. Let's just grab one and then flip back, and yeah, I was right about that. Also gets you a decoupler, I guess. Not sure if that's from Deadly Re-Entry. Yeah, I recognize that from Deadly Re-Entry, but I'm not sure we're actually going to need that. Those weird Phoenix Mars lander engines, I'm not sure why those are there, but hey, maybe it'll be useful for something. And then the science return capsules, which I don't know anything about, but I'm really excited to play around with. I think the first thing that we're going to do after we have unlocked all this stuff is we are going to build a... man, I have so many things that I want to work on next. Because a little while ago I said that the next thing I was going to do was a ComSat network, and I haven't gotten around to that yet. Ooh, so many things to do. It's really exciting. I really enjoy it. I love having this breadth of options. So yeah, I think because we're bottlenecked on science, we're going to leapfrog ahead with the sending up a advanced biological sample capsule. Alright, so opening up the Science Archive menu for Kerbalism, we can see that the regular biological sample, which I have completed because I did that before I installed Kerbalism. Haha, right. So we'll put that down there. And there we go. We'll just think about biological sample 2, which I have not yet done. Although I have not done this in, what do you call it, Space High. So that is also a scenario that we could do that if we wanted to really loft a satellite. I'm pretty sure an Atlas could do that. It would be really hard to get it back home, but anyways, it's a 20-minute thing, so just having a really high apoapsis might even be enough. Interesting. Yeah, so that's the kind of thing that we need to start thinking about, how we want to make this mission profile work. We also need to do biological sample 2 from the advanced biological capsule. While the small biological sample capsule only takes 20 minutes to run, we need to run the advanced one for a full day. And the samples are 10 kilograms apiece, and you're only going to get one sample out of the part, it looks like. So it's a 50 kilogram part, and this is a 15 kilogram part. And yeah, this all seems very, very doable. If not with the Thor Able, then definitely with the... my new Tela rocket. And we can run this on space low and also on space high. So we should probably test this in space low first to see how it works. I'm not sure that there's any more complicated thing than you run this science experiment here, and then when it finishes, you click down here, and then it'll probably have a, what do you call it, like a move science samples down here sort of thing, and then I'll be able to bring this down. Let's take a look at the... Max skin temp is 2500 Kelvin, which is pretty darn good. So yeah, that should be good. I'm not sure if this is intended. Oh no, it actually does have a blader on there. So yeah, this is actually also a heat shield built right in. So that is super handy. Yeah, so that's going to be a mission that I design and build pretty soon. And that opens up a brand new milestone that we are going to be able to achieve at the same time. I think what we'll end up doing is we'll end up launching that low, the advanced capsule, biological capsule, into low orbit to do that science, just to test that out, because that will be the least dangerous of the two options. So we'll do that one first and see how that one goes, and that should also get us this contract here, which will get us a nice big chunk of funds that I was not expecting. Completing this is going to unlock all sorts of stuff for us. Oh shoot, we can also do this 3 times. Oh, I love it, man. I keep finding out that these are, like, some of these big milestone contracts are actually repeatable a few times, and that ends up meaning like, oh, well, I've managed to get it once and that feels really worth it to me. And it's like, okay, well, that's great, but now do it 2 more times and keep getting the money for it. So that is the last thing that is keeping us from the first orbital flight human milestone, which I think is going to be a massive one. Yeah, so this is like that, when we got first orbit and it shut off all of our sounding rocket contracts. This is a marker that we are in a new era of space flight. So yeah, something to be taken not lightly at all. But we still have a lot of practice to do in the meantime. Like when we get our first capsules, we'll probably throw them out and use this suborbital flight crewed contract to test them. Which will be very good. It's good to always get money returned whenever you're trying to do new things. But unfortunately, I think that is all the time that we have for this episode, so I am going to leave you with a bit of a cliffhanger as we see the brand new Tele-1 rocket that we have put together emerge from the darkness and prepare for our flight to the moon, where we will be orbiting for the first time. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. Let me know what you thought down in the comments below, and I will see you next time.